pianists and teachers. Today we're talking about how to teach the little etude in A minor, sometimes called Petite Prelude or even called the harp. This is by Ludwig Schytte and it sounds like this. This is a fantastic little piece that packs a lot of punch. There are so many things you can discuss with your student and so many extensions that you can do to use the basics of this piece for creative opportunities as well as just theoretical integration. So it is one of my favorite pieces to teach, to really get students thinking about chords and about how they could use this chord progression to do some creative things. And I'll have some tips on that towards the end of the video, so make sure you stick around. If we haven't met before, my name is Jana Williamson and welcome to my home piano studio in the suburbs of Chicago. As I mentioned, this is such a great piece at this late elementary level, and it does show up in a lot of different books. So this is one that is included on my Method to Masterworks resource. If you haven't already checked that out, please go into the description of this video. It's a spreadsheet, which I think is quite beautiful in my opinion, along with a training video where it lists historical pieces such as this one or the easiest sonatinas or minuets that we find in method books like Piano Adventures and other similar books, and it tells you what other books you might find that same piece in so that you can find repertoire series at the right level for your student who is currently in a method series or is about to leave one and move into intermediate repertoire. So this piece in particular can be found in Alfred Premier Lesson Book 4, Hal Leonard Lesson Book 4, Faber's Developing Artist Piano Literature Book 1, Festival Collection 2, and Keith Snell's Etudes Book 1 or Essential Repertoire Book 1. So as you can see, that's a lot of books that contain this one tiny little etude. And I will say there's one funny thing about this particular piece. In most of those books, the pattern of the broken chords is ascending, but sometimes you actually see it descending. So I played it ascending a minute ago, but I know because I'm currently teaching this to a student who's using the Festival Collection Book 2, that it actually is written as descending in that book. To actually track down where this particular piece comes from. If you know what opus this comes from, then please let me know. Schytte, who was a Danish composer and yes, has a difficult pronunciation of his last name, I had to look that up to make sure I was saying it right. He wrote tons of music for students and I could not track this one down. So leave a comment if you know where it originally comes from. And I think it's so interesting that it's printed both ways. So we're in A minor and we are using basic triads and inversions. We have kind of like almost a pop sound, a pop song sound to this chord progression. If I just play the first 8 bars blocked, if you just take parts of that, you could really hear several pop songs in your head, and maybe you could ask your student, if they are someone who listens to a lot of pop, what it sounds like, what song it sounds like, and you could even jam with these chord progressions, which is one of the ideas for ways to be more creative. Could you take this chord progression in your left hand and write a little melody that goes along with it? You know, I just made that up on the spot. You could improvise for your student. You could have them play the chords while you improvise. All kinds of things. So your students do need to understand triads and inversions. And I'm going to switch to my overhead camera here and show you how I teach the basics of triads and inversions when we're first learning them. I'm going to use the A minor chord to demonstrate that. When first teaching my students how to play inversions, we play them just like this, taking whatever key we're currently working on for technique. Root. First, right hand uses finger 2. Second inversion, right hand uses 3 on A, back to root. Play that again. Left hand root. First inversion with finger 3, second inversion with finger 2. Play that again. And then you need to do lots of hand separate work on this until that feels very comfortable and the fingering is ingrained. Then they can play hands together. These can also be practiced broken, which I would also do hand separate first. So of course in this piece we don't have only A minor triads, we also have all the other things that come up. Measure 2 is a D minor second inversion triad, and so that's an example of fingering that I would want my student to be using 2 in the left hand on D, but 3 in the right hand on D. The same is true of measure 4, where you have a C major second inversion triad, left hand 2, right hand 3. And most of those student editions that I mentioned will actually label that fingering because the editors of those books know this is a student's early years of doing these inverted chords, and they want them to also use that standard fingering. Now that doesn't mean you forever and ever in your life have to use that fingering on a first inversion or second inversion triad. I don't mean that, but I do want my students to really memorize the shape and the feel of those chords and use the standard fingering when they are first learning that and taking that in physically. It's also important to note what the patterns are with these inversions. So we start with root, second, same idea, root, second, then F major root position, but it goes to D minor first inversion. So that's a typical problem spot, that measure 6 chord. They frequently do this instead, which really doesn't sound very nice because that's a B diminished triad. And then 7 and 8, you're back to that same pattern. The other problem spot for this is down at measure 13. Measure 9, 10, 11, 12 are the same. But then measure 13, instead of doing F major, has the D on the top to make D minor first inversion. So that is a chord that students always miss, or they get confused between measure 5 and measure 13. So we would definitely need to drill that. And you may have noticed that as I'm doing this, I'm playing them all blocked. This is a great introduction to students on seeing broken chords and then assigning blocked chord practice. Students will be resistant to this because if they haven't done it before or have done very little of it, because they think, no, Miss Jana, on the page I see note, 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 note. And I say, I know that, but we're gonna learn how to see those sets of notes and see them as a whole group, the A minor triad, or even the whole measure, both hands, A minor triad. And then you don't have to read so hard. When we're teaching piano, we want our students to read in groups of notes, in patterns, whether it be chord patterns, scale patterns, anything else that's very familiar to them. We want them to see those in groupings. It's much more efficient for reading, and it also just makes sure they're understanding what they're playing and not just seeing individual notes. Of course, that's how we read English words. We don't read individual letters. We see whole words and even whole phrases that make up sentences and paragraphs and make sense in our brains. I would assign blocked practice, and you could do this in 4 measure chunks or 8 measure chunks, or you could, of course, do the entire piece. So they should be able to come back after that first week of practice and really be able to do this. You could even challenge them, how fast can you get through those first 4 chords? Can they really do it? Because that will show you that they understand the shapes, they know how to use the fingering. And then playing it, either ascending or descending, is so simple because they're just going from the bottom to the top or reverse. Now related to that, this is in 6/8 time, and students do sometimes struggle with compound meter. This is a great piece to practice compound meter because it's just a string of 8th notes, but they do need to feel that it's constantly flowing, and you want to avoid stops on the bar line while they figure out what's coming next. So we're looking for a physical flow as well as a rhythmically hearing the flow of 1 and 2. important that students roll off of the notes because the next thing we're going to work on is pedal. And if the right hand holds the notes down after they are played, that chord will bleed into the next measure's harmony, and you don't want that. So this is also a great etude in syncopated or legato pedaling. So what do students usually do? They usually change the pedal too early, or they don't stay with their finger on the first note of the measure long enough in order to catch that one in the bar. So it could sound like this if they pedal too early. Right? And then it's not actually connected. Or I'll try to do this. It's a little hard once you know how to do it. If they don't hold the pinky in the left hand just a little bit extra, then it won't be in the pedal. I can't even do it because I've been playing syncopated pedal my entire life, but I think if you've taught very long, you know exactly what that sounds like. So you certainly could practice pedal with the blocked chords, so they get the experience of lifting up and listening for that connection. Teaching syncopated pedal the first time is always good to do with some sort of blocked interval or triad where your student has to move their hands around. And if your student struggles with that at first, they are in good company. Most students struggle with syncopated pedal when they are first doing it. So it is a concept that we have to really clearly teach them how to do and then help them learn how to listen to see if they are doing it correctly. It's both physical and aural attention that they have to pay to that. All right, so let's talk about opportunities for variation. Well, you can certainly look at this chord progression and think there's a lot of things I could do besides just play eighth notes broken up going up or down. If your addition is printed going up, then you can certainly just teach your student the first variation could be to go down. Then the other option would be to play it blocked, either as I demonstrated or with some sort of rhythm. So you could do a very basic rhythm of left, right, left, right. You could change it from a compound meter to a simple meter, a 4/4. You could get kind of syncopated with it, have a little bit of a Latin feel. And then you could do any kind of combination of that, of changing the rhythm and also doing some of it blocked or some of it broken. Or so those are just ideas that I'm doing on the top of my head, which I would demonstrate to my student and ask them to try some of my variations that I give them, which, like I said, the most obvious is just going the opposite direction, ascending or descending. And then I would probably give them another rhythm to do, like something pretty simple. And then I would ask them to come up with their own variation. Now, some students right away are going to be happy to do this and like, yes, I can make my own version of this piece. Other students are going to be very reticent to do this because they like to do things right and they don't feel comfortable coming up with their own ideas. So I would encourage my student as much as possible. Say, no, I really do want you to come up with at least one idea and I will help you. And I will have already fed them several ideas. And if they, in the next week, repeat one of my ideas without knowing it was my idea, that's fine. They can claim it as their own. But I do want them to use this for some sort of creativity. This is, of course, going to lead to students later on being able to play various accompaniment styles for lead sheets. If you even think about the very simple heart and soul, doing something along those lines later on with your student where they're playing a bass line in their left hand and chords in their right hand. And this is the kind of thing that Forrest Kinney has explained very clearly in his puzzle play series, which I do recommend frequently to teachers. I will link that in the description of this video if you're interested in checking it out. But I feel like creativity in arranging is one of the best things we can do with our students. If they're ever going to use their piano skills for something practical, like playing in church or playing musical theater or anything else like that, they're going to want to know how to read chords and how to arrange it for the particular song at hand, how to give it some rhythmic sense. So this is like a baby version, a first steps version of how to start thinking about doing that. And also to give our students the perspective of, we can play what the composer wrote and observe the score, and then we can also use the same chord progression that he did and make it our own. And what a great way to integrate creativity with repertoire and to make this piece a much more memorable and impactful learning experience than just playing a bunch of eighth notes for 16 measures. All right, I hope that's given you a few ideas on how to teach this little etude, also known as the harp. If you haven't already checked out Method to Masterworks, please do go into the description of this video and click that link. Let me know if you have questions about this piece or anything else, and I wish you all the best in your teaching and playing.